Hello, this is Heather from the Reading Mama and Raising Aaron's Mama. I'm going to do a cross post video here for my homeschool channel and my booktube channel. We studied the modern history this year, US world, all of it. And so I thought I'd share some of the historical fiction from the 50s and beyond. I do have a totally separate video on our Vietnam books, and most of those I got from the library, so I do not have them here before me. But I thought I'd share with the ones that we have that I felt like we needed to buy and have on our shelf. So first, I have these books by Eugene Yelkin, which give an insight into what life was like living behind the Iron Curtain. The Genius Under the Table is very biographical for his life and very interesting, as I believe they are Jewish. If I could be wrong though. Anyways, it's very interesting kind of to see what life was like, because that's not something we really talk about much. I didn't actually get around to reading this one. I've heard such great things about it. I was supposed to read it to my youngest, my second grader, and I totally forgot. She brought it to me our last week in school, and said, hey, are we gonna read this? So hopefully we will get to that. I do have a biographical Vietnam book that we had our fifth grader read, and I think it was great for her because Vietnam is one of those topics that I don't feel like needs to necessarily go into detail with younger kids, and I think this is very accessible. But it tells the life of Major Fred Cherry, who is an African-American soldier during Vietnam, and his experience, which is harrowing, but it is done in a way that I felt like was accessible for my kids. My oldest high schooler read The Wednesday Wars, and I would recommend this for middle school and up. Involving Holly Hood here in America, and he ends up being alone with his homeroom teacher because of things on Wednesdays for an entire year. And they start reading Shakespeare together. He thinks his teacher hates him, and in the end, it's a wonderful relationship. Everything's great. It's very insightful, trying to see what it was like for everyday people and their responses, because all the Vietnam stuff, all the Nixon stuff, all of that is going on in the background. Robert Kennedy, everything is going on in the background, and you're getting that kind of as a bypass through the story. And I think it's a really great way to make that accessible to kids as well. His sister is very much in the anti-war movement, and it's just, there's a lot that goes on, and kind of describes what life was like. And I think that's a great fit. Blackbird Girls is phenomenal by Anne Blankman, and I say this is middle school on up. I really loved it as well. This is a multi point of view, and while you do have somebody who is in Rivka, who is in World War II and trying to escape because she is Jewish, there is also these two women, and I don't know where they end up going, but they're at Chernobyl when all of that happens, and they don't really understand what's going on, and it just tells what life is like. There's one who, her family was Jewish, they are marked Jewish even though they don't do anything that is Jewish, and she gets to learn about her Jewish life later on, and what that faith means to her. It's a beautiful story of friendship, a beautiful story of just, I don't know, she does a great job going between the multiple points of view and the multiple timelines. The baby is okay. She's just dramatic. But this was really wonderful, and I highly recommend it for both stories. They're both intense, both World War II and the Chernobyl incidents and all that going on there in Russia, in Soviet Union rather. And I think it gives a good idea of what life was like in both time periods and what things they were facing. Another great historical fiction is Jennifer Hay Nielsen. I love her historical fiction. Her newer books have been a little disappointing, but her older books I love. And A Night Divided is phenomenal. A Night Divided gives you a perspective of the Berlin Wall. And I believe it's just from Goethe, but I think you just get Goethe's perspective. But maybe you don't. I don't remember. It's been a while since I read it. But this one was a little more intense, and I did wait for my sensitive child to be a little bit older to read it because of the violence that takes place for those who are trying to escape and at the wall. But I feel like middle grade and high school are pretty good. Just know your student. If you have somebody who's a little more sensitive, there is an intense scene. But it gives them, again, an idea of what it was like. You'll see there's a lot of communism books here. It's really, maybe that's what I should title it. But yeah, that was kind of the perspective there. going on. I have read Scarf Girl, a memoir of the Cultural Revolution. So this is not historical fiction, but it is a memoir of this young woman, Jillian Zhang, and her experience in China during the Cultural Revolution. And I listened to this as audiobook, and it was well done. And my daughter read the book, and it has like a lovely pronunciation key for those Chinese words that are tricky. And it goes through and just tells her experience as a young girl. I feel like she was upper elementary, middle school age as she goes through it, and gives you a little insight of what life was like there. And so that was very interesting. And then let's just stick with the communism for right now. I Must Betray You by Ruta Sepetys. I cannot recommend this enough. I think every grown-up should read it because it is phenomenal and gives you an insight into a less known event in the world for those of us of my generation. And this is taking place in Romania, and it talks about the liberation from the communist regime and what life was like there, and just the horrors that went through. If you are fans of the Wurmbrands, or your kids have read any of the Wurmbrand biographies, they'll know a mention of them in here. Also, the prison that the character goes to is mentioned in Sabina Wurmbrand's biography because she was sent there. And so it's very interesting just to kind of see it. And so I highly recommend I Must Betray You by Ruta Sepetys. It does get intense. I do not recommend it for middle school, but it is one of the best Ruta Sepetys books, I think, because it is, while there is violence, I don't feel like it was over graphic, but graphic is in the eye of the beholder, I guess. But it gives a good example of what life was like, and my teen also highly recommend. And last but not least, I have The Night Divided, and I'm kind of cheating because this is the 40s. But I feel like this is something that is not talked about because when you read in the 40s, you often are getting all the World War II perspectives, and the separation of Pakistan and India is something that I think all kids should know about, and I think this is done very well at a middle grade to YA level. It does have a couple intense moments, specifically a train scene I remember being very intense and had me bawling. But you follow a family who is traveling, and I want to say that they're going from Pakistan to India. Yeah, they decide that it would be too dangerous for them to stay. Their family is a mix of the two different religions that are going on here. They have, I can't remember which parent is which, but it is a difficult decision. And then you see what life was like for them there, what life is like when they move. You see what it's like in the horrible transition. Both people leaving, like just people crossing, walking miles and miles, some going up and some going down, you know, and just the things that they had to endure right there in the late 40s when the split happened. And so I think this is written very well, and I highly recommend it. So I am cheating a little bit on that one. But those are my modern history books that we read. We also, another book I didn't buy was Brother's Keeper by Julie Lee, and I will be buying that one. I think it is wonderful. I got it from the library, and some of my kids just read it over Christmas break, so I didn't have them read it for school. And that talks about some children who are trying to flee North Korea at all costs, and that was just phenomenal. I also had a child read Little Leap Forward, which gave another example of life in communist China. Trying to see if I had any others up here. There's a couple, Refugee and Ground Zero from Alan Gratz. My kids read for fun, so I didn't end up having them read that for school because those are more modern set. Refugee by Alan Gratz follows multiple timelines. You've got World War II, you have somebody leaving Cuba, and I feel like there's a third one and I'm missing it. And it's just phenomenal. I cannot recommend it enough. You will cry. I think Serbia is where the other person's from. Anyways, it's phenomenal. His Ground Zero, also phenomenal, very well done, at a YA middle grade, depending on how sensitive your reader is. Very well done. And then one that I'm hoping to get my kids to read in the near future is A Long Walk to Water by Linda Sue Park, because it is also phenomenal, and it is a boy's journey trying to escape in Africa, and I cannot remember exactly where, but anything Linda Sue Park writes is phenomenal, and this is set in a more modern setting in Africa, and I highly recommend that. Otherwise, those were all of our books that we read, historical fiction wise, for this modern 1950s, 1947 and on. If you have some historical fiction books that you recommend for YA middle grade in that time frame, drop them below. Love to help other people find good books to help your kids learn about time periods besides their own. Thank you so much for watching, and have a blessed day.